What's up, guys? Welcome to the podcast. Today we're talking about Gladiator pennies, the importance of every penny and every idea fighting for its right to survive in your business. Hope y'all enjoy the episode. What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 3 of our Building Block series, which is a part of the podcast Losing Season, where we talk about things we learned during our first failed startups. We talk about the things we got right, the things we got wrong, and the things that we're doing differently going into the future today. And we try to do it in under 10 minutes to keep it super digestible. We don't get caught up in the weeds. We're going to get into things more deeply later on in the podcast series. But for now, just 10 minutes. Super digestible, big ideas, and we'll dissect it later. Today, we're talking about what I like to call gladiator culture for pennies, not for people. And we're talking about like budgeting and kind of the boring stuff that we just didn't do a good job of at our last startup. And honestly, you know, when I got into that startup, I was coming off of reading Gino Wickman's Rocket Fuel, and I thought that, you know, I was getting into business with people who would run the financial side of things at a high level so that I could just work, because that's all I've ever wanted to do is I just want to work, and I want to create things, and I want to grow a business, and I want to promote a business, and I want to build a business. And you know, we found out pretty quickly that, that me and my business partner were both like that. You know what I mean? And so we put things in place, or at least I thought we had to take care of that, you know, take care of the infrastructure side of things, especially when it comes to finances. In later podcasts, we'll talk about how that was not necessarily true, and how, as I started to realize that that wasn't true, things kind of fell apart. But yeah, we're not going to talk about that today. We're going to get into the lessons we learned in as far as how to spend your money in a startup. So the first thing is, a lot of people were right. There's nothing wrong with building a boring business that spends responsibly, scales over time, and keeps a mega low overhead. And as far as overhead goes, I think something when you are scaling for the first time, you don't realize how many little things can add up to big things over time, and that's just a typical budgeting thing. But I think the biggest thing too is like there's a lot of lies that you tell yourself. Like when we got our office, you know, we were just spending too much on it. There's nobody in the business that will tell you that we weren't spending too much on the office, but we told ourselves like, hey, the sales team will grow into it. You know, we told ourselves things like that. And anytime you have to justify an expense that way, it's wrong. It's just not the right move. And because of that, I looked at what other companies who are successful now that were on the launch pad with us, what their thoughts were towards these same issues and why they were successful and we weren't. And they have this really gladiatorial process for every penny in their business. Like every single penny has to fight for its right to survive. And every single employment position has to fight for its right to survive. And it's just very matter of fact. And so when they talk about, you know, marketing and offices and things like that, like those things have to prove their worth. And they have to prove their worth with a little bit before they get a lot of it. And, you know, that's something that we just did a bad job of. I think that, you know, in our last episode, we talked about work culture. I think that this is something that stacks on top of that, because you have to have a great work culture where people understand, your employees understand how important every penny is, so they're not wasteful, one, and they are their feelings aren't hurt when you turn their idea down because it hasn't proven itself yet, or because it's just not a good idea for the business. Maybe it's a good idea, but not for that time in the business too. And I looked up a couple times, and we were so worried about losing employees and what employees thought and what the outside world thought, that where we were putting our money back into our business wasn't necessarily for the strength of the business. You know, it was because we were trying to show somebody that we took them seriously, or we were trying to show somebody that, like we were like virtue signaling them in a way. It was very strange, especially on the sales side of the business. I feel like we did that a good bit. But yeah, so not only do ideas have to fight for their right to survive, every line item in your budget has to fight for a right to survive, and really every minute of your day on your calendar has to fight for a right to survive. I think that we booked ourselves up with meetings so much that, it kind of stole, like that time we should have just been working. We were constantly meeting about things instead of just keeping it simple and going out there and doing them. And so in that way, we were wasteful. So we were wasteful with our time. Our money, almost all of it went back into the business, and I think that is correct. But we were wasteful with where we put it. And our people, we were in return, as a byproduct of having a bad culture, we were wasteful of their time too. And that includes, for most of them, the entirety of the time they worked for us, which we talked about in episode 1, which was super, super heavy. So I say all that to say, like, hey, if you're running a startup right now, you don't have to get caught up in the 2021 startup lore where you scale as fast as you can and market share is the only thing that matters, and you take as much money as you can to grow at a rate that just is like keeping up with the Joneses. Like, it's not and people get lucky and get successful, but for most people, it's not the right way to run a business. You want to have low overhead, sustainable growth, and a really good work culture of people who don't get their feelings hurt, but are still excited about constantly presenting ideas. And fostering that culture where people are excited about presenting ideas, but don't get their feelings hurt when they aren't picked is like really, really important. And that goes back to like how I bought flips too. It wasn't just on the sales side. I think really good flips, you buy them cheaper than you think you need to. You make sure there's enough room in the budget to put more in them than you think you're going to. And then you make sure that you can sell them for less than you think you're going to sell them for. And anytime I look back at a flip that didn't go well, one of those 3 things was wrong. And so it's okay to make a gazillion offers and just get one house that month and scale a little bit slower. As long as it checks all 3 of those boxes. And the great part about that is if you're financially responsible through the rest of it, then if you get 7 one month down the road a little bit, you can do all 7 because you got the cash to do it. And you got the cash to throw at some things if things go wrong along the way. And that's really important. And then I think like the other thing is also just the cost of money. At some point you're going to have to take on debt as a business. That is really important. And that goes back to that gladiator penny culture where it's like, hey, is this debt? Death is the right word. You know what I mean? Like, is this leverage worth the risk? And that's what debt is. It's risk. You know what I mean? And so like the interest you pay on it is just like risk squared. So being able to borrow money at a very reasonable rate on very reasonable terms is extremely important. But those first, 50, 60, 70, 100 times that you use debt, it's really expensive. And you have to like really weigh whether or not it is worth it to do. Especially because banks are huge institutions and like right or wrong, good luck fighting a bank, even if they're just dead wrong. Let me tell you, it's not a winning battle. Even when banks are on the wrong side of the law, having an attorney or a team of attorneys on retainer, they can just drag this thing out as much as they want to. So you have to consider that when you're considering the debt as well. And then lastly, I say all of that to say you can do all of this correctly, but if you don't have an independent third party doing your books the entire time, none of it matters because you don't know if the data you're getting is correct. And until you have the correct data, you can't even talk about any of this stuff because you don't know if you're making a good decision. How can you weigh the checks and balances of different options when it comes to finances when you don't have good books? And that is something that was really hard to learn, because I was hopeful that that was not the case. But what I've learned is that as I grow my next business, the lesson I'm taking out of it is that there's no partner, there's no setup, there's no anything that's going to do some of these things for you. You just have to do it yourself. And you have to take accountability for everything across the board. And that means you just got to do it slower, and you got to do it more rigorously, and you have to finish one step completely and fully and be in full understanding of it before you move on to the next step. And when you do it that way, and you're innovative, and you're solving a big problem, and you're just willing to wake up every day and outwork the next guy, because that's really all that separates us every day, is what we do that day, right? That's what makes us special. It's not like something we're born with. It's like what we do in that 40 hours that week, that 50 hours that week, that 60 hours that week, whatever you want to devote to that business. That's what it does, So anyways, we're coming up on 11 minutes. We try to keep them under 10. I'm going to say it's under 10 because we had the intro, you know what I mean? So that is episode 3, Gladiator Pennies, from our Building Blocks series, where we talk about what went wrong and what went right in our first startup. And it's part of losing season, the podcast about failure. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I will see y'all next week. And we'll keep stacking these on top of each other. All right.